Hi guys, and welcome to Kaleidoscope Literacy, where I'm not going to review The Reaper and the Waiting, sadly. I would love to, but I tried recording it, and I realized how short the webcomic is, and how I don't want to give a lot of spoilers, and if I were to talk about The Reaper and the Waiting, I would give a ton of spoilers, because a lot of what I would have to analyze is spoilers. So I want you to read it. It's a canvas comic, and it got published into a physical copy. So I really want you to guys get hyped and read the comic, The Ripper and the Waiting, which is about grief and has a lot of really cool Chinese mythologies and stuff. So I highly recommend it. Go check it out on Webtoons. The Ripper and Waiting is a fantastic read. It easily got a 5 out of 5 stars from me. But it's so great that I can't talk about it without spoiling it. So highly recommend it. Go onto Webtoons. Read The Ripper and the Waiting. This is not sponsored. I am not sponsored at all. Just read it. Check it out. Give it some love. It is amazing and spectacular. So instead of that, I'm going to review. That was not good. I just messed with my tripod. I'm going to have to record this again. Look, though. If it's fine, I'll keep it. It turned out it was fine. Although you hear me scream, I kicked my tripod. So I thought, oh no, it's going to be all wibbly, but no, it's fine, which is good because it's only doing my face. For being a VTuber, I don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. So, anyways, book I'm going to review, Necromancy Light, which is adorable because I love necromancy, like the magic of the fantasy of it, and the necromancers are such a fascinating class of magic. I would never want to be a necromancer, but I think it's a really fascinating magic. Could be because I'm Mexican and we have the whole Day of the Dead thing. Could be. Anyways, summary of it. As a necromancer, Sean loses a little more of himself every time he uses his magic. Always cold, always touch starved. Same, bro. I mean the touch starved, bro. Not the cold part. The only thing that helps is human contact. But that's hard to come when those same dark powers scare everyone away from him. Nobody likes a necromancer, especially a paladin of the Radiant Order. Arthur is still bitter and broken after his last lover stabbed him in the back, and the last thing he needs is another brush with evil. When he agrees to escort the wandering necromancer to the north, he's just doing a public servant. But he never expected Shaw to be so clingy. Period. Or distractively attractive. Sean has never felt an aura as warm and safe as Arthur. He craves the man's touch and more. Wink, wink. But everyone he knows has left him, and it's just a matter of time before Arthur leaves him too, assuming the soul-stealing monster doesn't kill him first. So yeah, that's the summary of it, but it's such more than that. It's standing for what you believe in and kind of understanding prejudice from other people and how you might think a group of person is great and they're totally not prejudiced. And it turns out they are. Again, like it says, necromancy is considered kind of one of those forbidden magics because you're making a deal with it. And every time you use necromancy, you're slowly giving up part of your soul. And to protect that soul, you wear silver, which I love that aspect of it. The fact that people can recognize a necromancer because they're wearing silver is hilarious. And also just sad because they're literally using silver to protect themselves. That's also the thing that is putting themselves in danger. And Shaw, he didn't want to become a necromancer. There was a position in his life that forced him to become a necromancer. It's kind of like a reverse version of Sheila from Critical Role. I'm not going to give up spoilers from the Mighty Nine series, the second campaign of Critical Role, but Shaw is kind of left alone because of circumstances in his life, and he ends up being drawn to the power of necromancy in a very Full Metal Alchemist kind of move, trying to bring his parents to life, and he ends up having to live with the consequences at a very young age. And it's that's kind of the tragedy of it. he was so young that he really didn't understand the consequences of his actions. And what's even worse is that because he was so young, the demon he summons sees them as some very multiple targets and seizes him with power. But I love the fact that it's about Arthur. There's so many times where Arthur treats Shaw like he's being rude to people around him, and he's not recognizing like he's being off-putting to protect himself and keep himself safe. And it's so fascinating when Arthur realizes this. And I also love the fact that all the paladins, like you're expecting all the paladins to be very straight. They're not. Everyone's kind of like a little flavor of queer throughout this book, which is exciting and amazing, and I love it. There's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of like weird, creepy stuff where Shaw uses his necromancy, and we really get the experience. It's very detailed how cold, like why is he cold, and why he has to wear a ton of silver. And it's really fascinating, and I really like the fact that the magic system makes sense, and it's very realistic. Like, it makes you feel what Shaw feels when he uses magic, or where Arthur uses his paladin magic. Arthur is he's what is it called? The Divine Light or something? The Radiant Order, which is like this really, like a lawful paladin. Like, it's an order of law. And that's even worse when you find out that Arthur is not a part of that community because he trusted someone that ended up betraying his order. And it's really fascinating because they both chose a lifestyle when they were younger, and it's really interesting how they both kind of learn that they both made mistakes in doing it at such a young age, not really understanding their own choices. And it really doesn't speak down to them, and it lets them like really understand their choices and whatnot. So yeah, it's a good book. I could talk more about it, but there's so much things in the book that deal with their own trauma that I don't want to give too much spoilers. It's really good. And I want people to read it without too much information. But let's just say, well, Arthur kind of gives it away. The fact that he did have a lover who ends up betraying him to get information to be able to get something from the order. And this is the first part of the book, so I'm really interested in how that affects the sequel. And Shaw is treated like a target, and it's really humorous how Arthur's like, oh, why is Shaw being so rude? And later he's like, oh, he's being that way because if he doesn't, he can get hurt and people talk badly about him, so at least he's going to be defensive and protect himself from physical harm because he knows he's going to get emotionally hurt and outsided and outcasted. So at least he can physically protect himself, which makes perfect sense. So I absolutely love that aspect of it. The world really feels alive, although I kind of don't understand like the political movements in the book, because there's a lot of discussion on politics, but there isn't a real clear indication of how politics affect the world, which is kind of disappointing. But I did hear this as an audiobook, and I couldn't find the physical book, so it might have been more explained if I could see the actual words or something. But yeah, I'm hoping it gets clarified in the sequel, because as of right now, there was a lot of talk about politics, because there's a talk about like, oh yeah, you might not be able to go back into the order because there's a political issue, and because of what happened with your lover, we're gonna have to deal with something, and are gonna try to make an escape. Like, what are you saying that the temple's corrupt or something? Like, what the heck's going on? It's a weird thing, which is weird because I'm gonna talk about a sequel. This is a pretty short review, but yeah, it's summary of what the book was about. It's kind of about really living with the choices you made as teens, and in some cases, redefining yourself and separating yourself from the choices you made as a youth and being able to step forward in a new life, in a new way. So I think I gave this one a 5 out of 5 as well. Like, I loved it so much. It was really good. Again, I don't get the whole like political corruption thing, but it never got like talked about. They talked about it so much At one point, Arthur meets with his members of his guild or temple, and they talk about like this political corruption or whatnot. There's a political weird thing about it, and it's never brought up again. And I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna have to give a little bit of spoilers. I was hoping I wouldn't have to give spoilers away, but I'm gonna give spoilers. So, Full Metal Alchemist, Shaw's parents pass away. In his case, they were killed by bandits. And so him learning his mom was a head witch, and so he kind of found an understanding of magic, found a way to summon a demon to be able to become a necromancer and recreate his mom. But then he realized that was a terrible decision and binded the demon to a location and ran away like a coward, kind of like a Lion King kind of moment. And so he's outsetted and outcasted for being a necromancer who really didn't want to be a necromancer, but he's managed to live his life as a necromancer until 10 years later. And then he finds the thing he used to bind the demon is breaking. And so he has to go back home, but he has to get there safely. And the demon is sending creatures to kill him so that the bindings will break. And so he needs an escort. But the problem with being a necromancer and being an outsider is that a ton of the times, escorts abandon it. Technically, this isn't a spoiler. It's the first part of the book. But anyways, escorts abandon him. And so he's like, I need to find... Like, the last escort that took him was a drunkard who drank and then literally abandoned him in the middle of freaking nowhere. So he's like, I just need an escort to get me back home so that I can do this job. And I don't want to be killed by the demons, that monsters that the demon are summoning. And so that's how he meets Arthur, who's doing penance for letting a traitor take a really valuable object from the Radiant Order. And so that's how they meet. And the fact that it said, like, oh yeah, he's always cold. It's every time he uses his the magic of necromancy, like he uses necromancy, part of his soul gets split apart, which is why he's wearing all the silver to keep that little part of his soul secure. And he needs, if he touches another person, he can extract their life energy, and that can rebuild his soul. But because necromancers are like really creepy and they confuse them for something else with an N, they get outsited, and so he doesn't get to touch a lot of people. And because they have to sleep together and be together, especially because of the last person, he really wants to like know where his escort is, where Arthur is. He ends up like really touching him, and because he's from the Radiant Order, his light magic helps heal a lot of the damage that's been done to his soul. So they become really close and adorable. So yeah, that's kind of the story itself. It's really amazing and spectacular, and I love the different ways of the magic system is worked, and like how Arthur, who has these prejudices against the necromancer, kind of like learns to accept him, and the fact that Sean uses his necromancy magic in front of him, and Arthur's the first person to try to help him, and because to use the necromancy magic, he has to hurt himself, like cut himself. He has to use his own blood, which makes sense. And Arthur's the first person to like provide first aid after he uses magic, which is delightful. So yes, 5 out of 5 stars. Highly recommended. Audiobook, fantastic. The story, fantastic. I love all the characters. They have flaws. They're human. And no one's perfect. It's really nice. So yeah, highly recommend it.